Yo, what's good, Knicks Nation? Welcome back to another Game of the Week preview. You already know what it is. We got Game 1 this Saturday against the Detroit Pistons. Everyone's talking brazy out there, man. Everyone's trying to get, feathers riled up, right? New York Knicks are going to be hosted at 6 p.m. You already know what it is. I got Omari Sankofa the second on here with me. He covers the Detroit Pistons for the Detroit Free Press, and he also is the co-host for the Pistons Pulse podcast. So make sure to go check him out there. We're going to break this thing down all which ways. That way we get the best coverage. You already know what we do over here at KnicksFanTV. So make sure to hit that thumbs up button for your boys. Make sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. Make sure to support our sponsor, Underdog Fantasy. Use that promo code KFTV to get to $1,000 in instant bonus cash and a free pick. Omari, what's going on, man? How you feeling today? You ready for playoff basketball?
I'm ready for playoff basketball, man. It's been a unique week. I tweeted the other day, like there's no controversy to cover. There's no, coaching search, no GM search. The team's in a good spot. The vibes are good. And there's nothing to look forward to except more basketball, which is great. And this is I feel like the perfect matchup as far as the potential for drama and, some things that'll cause some conversation, right? It's a
There you
feisty
go.
Pistons team. The Knicks are the Knicks. It's just fun, man. I'm looking forward to getting out there in New York, and I can't wait for Game 1 on Saturday.
Yeah, it's going to be a good one. And you're talking about not having to cover drama in the wrong way. And as a Knicks fan, we certainly know that. So
Yeah,
I'm happy for Pistons fans because, I know that Pistons Nation out there is strong. It is heavy, especially when you go on X. Like they're all riled up. They're all ready to talk, man. And it's good because we get two fan bases now that are going to be chomping at the bit to see this action, man. Because the Pistons play a tough brand of basketball. Knicks are closer to a finesse team now. So speaking on that, let me ask you this: what has been your thoughts on the New York Knicks this season?
they're a good team. I think when you make the move they made right before training camp to go for Cat, and the draft capital you invested, you probably hope to have a season closer to what Cleveland had, or even what Boston had, compared to what they did have. You're the third seed. That's still good. But, I think you see tiers in the East. And, the Cavs and Boston are probably in that first tier. And, the Knicks, despite being third, you could probably debate, whether like the second tier might start with them. And they
Mhm.
just didn't hit that second level. With that being said, I think the playoffs can be simpler in the fact that, if you can defend capably, and I'm curious to see how they hold up. But they're not a bad defensive team. I mean, they're a tips team, so you're going to be at least average. But like, how much does just having Brunson and Cat just kind of solve issues for you in like a game of 7 series? So like they're in a good spot, right? Like you got 51 wins, I believe. Like you're like it's something to be ashamed of. I just don't know if that's the season you wanted after you invested what you did coming into the season.
And talking about that essentially this entire season, man, especially
Yeah.
wrapping up. Like, is this what we wanted as Knicks Nation after you made those big trades, as you mentioned? And, it's somewhere in the middle. Like, they didn't exceed expectations, but they didn't miss the mark either, right? And so when you look at the season, it's kind of like, all right, so we made all these trades. We got one extra win than last year. The offense, when it's clicking, is just potent as all hell. Defensively, we already know the woes. We saw over the last month the defense start to tick up. Granted, Mitchell Robinson returned, Jalen Brunson was out, so maybe you say, hey, now you add, you have somebody like Deuce out there in the starting rotation or anybody else that's not Jalen Brunson who's a slight better defender. Are those numbers a little bit inflated? You can also look at the quality opponent. There's a lot to be figured out, and I think this matchup, even though some Knicks, it's so interesting, man, covering the Knicks, and I want to know your thoughts on the Pistons fan base in a minute. But like when you covering the Knicks, like the fan base is not completely 50-50, but there's some fans that are torn saying, oh, the Knicks are about to lose to the Pistons. Some are going to say that, that this season didn't really mean much after all the trades that you made. Some will also say this team is soft, so they don't know if they can keep up with the physicality of Detroit. And so there's just a lot of questions going around. And I think the postseason is what everyone's been waiting for because we need to know, can this team lock in and focus for 48 minutes on a consistent night to night basis in order to show that they are one of these better teams, to show that they did making these trades was worth it, and that they're just not, it's not, what was it? You didn't just make a lateral move and you could have saved put probably like from what last season was, and then do potentially even be better than this season. So there's a lot to be answered in this postseason, and we get to have the honor of playing the, bounce back Detroit Pistons, man, which is nice to see. So that being said, there's a lot of questions. We're going to dive deep into that matchup, and a lot of these questions are going to be discussed in the show. But I got to ask you now, Detroit. You're saying you get to. It's not the drama that you wanted. Now it's the good drama. It's like, all right, the drama of like between the Knicks and the Pistons in the
Yeah.
playoffs. Talk about the Pistons, man, and their turnaround season.
Yeah. No, now it's just hoops. And, it's interesting because coming into the season, you look at the East and it's like, you can get into the postseason, and that's including playing without a winning record. Like, if you could scratch 33, 34 wins, you get yourself in the conversation. And you look at the history of just year to year improvements, and you don't see too many 20 plus win improvements. So logically, you come into the season, like if they go from 14 wins to low 30s and you flirt with that 9 or 10, you're in a good scenario. And opening the season, they were like 11 and 17 before they really got going. And that's like that's an improvement. Like pretty much by mid-December, you were like at 85% basically of your win total from the previous season, and you're clearly an improved team. And then they just kind of found their swagger like toward the end of like December. And I would say I think it was December 6th, like early December, they went to Madison Square Garden and Cade had that triple double at the Garden, and they won. And I think that stopped like a 14 or 15 game losing streak or something crazy to the Knicks.
Hmm.
That actually was one of the first games where they began to kind of figure out, like, okay, like if we can go into the Garden and K could have that type of game, where we could step up and win there, then we could replicate this elsewhere. And they went on the road. It was like essentially like a Christmas break road trip, and in a row they beat the Lakers. I'm sorry, they beat Phoenix, they beat the Lakers, and then they beat Sacramento. And then they ended up finishing that trip with a loss in Denver, but they ended up winning. I want to say, like, they ended up going on a pretty good winning streak, and then they carried an 8 game winning streak through February. And then you add Dennis Schroeder, and that kind of stabilized them down the stretch. So it's been a very gradual thing where you go from, okay, they haven't taken that many steps forward. They were 0-3 to start the season to, okay, you're 11-17, you're figuring some stuff out, to okay, you just went 3 straight on the road and now you're sniffing 500 after New Year's, to okay, like they're actually defending every single night and like engineering ways to win in games that they would have engineered ways to lose last season. Because last season, like they won 14 games, but they were probably like 8 or 9 possessions away from being like a 20-win team, which is still
Hmm.
not good, but there's a big difference between 20 regular bad and like 14 historic.
For sure.
But the margins last season really were that thin. You look at their net rating, and they were not like an all-time bad net rating team. Like they weren't even the worst in the league. They were like 25th last year, but the record was what it was. So this year felt like whatever happened last season, they just kind of flushed it, and then they picked up where they should have been last season. Essentially, if you win 30 last season, now you come out and you win 44. Like that's a logical progression. Something misfired early last year, and they just never recovered. But this year, it felt like they essentially picked up where they should have been, and I mean, you add 30 wins to your win total, like that's pretty incredible. So even seeing it up close, it's still been a little surreal. Like no play-in, 6 seed, like you get 4 national TV games at least at Madison Square Garden. It's an incredible turnaround, and it happened really in short order.
For sure. And this kind of reminds me of like the Knicks season going from like 2019 to 2019-20 season where we just got Julius that offseason. He was our consolation prize and losing out on Zion, KD, Kyrie. And they went 21 and 45. Obviously, that was when COVID came, and so it was a shortened season. Then you go into another shortened season right afterwards, right? You had the bubble season, and then the Knicks went from 21 wins to 41 wins. And so they doubled, their win total. And then you talk about what Detroit did. And this kind of feels like similar to me and what the Knicks did a few years ago, where they, we talked about playing too. Knicks just went above that. They said, yo, we're a playoff team. Now, granted, Knicks went out in a gentleman sweep to the Atlanta Hawks. Um, but do you find the similarities? I guess this is where I'm getting at. Do you see any similarities between the Knicks and between the Pistons? Because they also played a physical brand of basketball and they relied heavily on their defense. And even when I look at that 2020, 2021 team with just Julius, you know, obviously not, I'm not saying he's like Cade at all, but you had like one guy who could attack at all three faces, and then you had a bunch of role players right next to him, and you just feel like they overachieved. Do you think this was like an overachieving season, or like how do you measure that?
Yeah, and that's what's tough, right? Because like you mentioned, you'll have teams in the past that perform well, and for whatever reason, it's just not sustained. And I feel like the Knicks have kind of had that, like we're trying to build something, but if you look at the entirety of the last 10 years, there's been more off years than on, and it's not like that when we're trying to compete. It's just kind of worked out that way. You have bad salary, and we don't need to go through the whole history, but obviously it's been quite the journey to get here. And I would say if there is one similarity between the two, is that the NBA is kind of funny where like it takes a while to get to like that competition threshold, but then when you actually get to that threshold, a lot of times that's the start of like what you're actually going to become. And I think the Knicks kind of found that like, you made a really good signing with Jalen Brunson, and you kind of got an established base. Obviously, Julius Randle, coming in, and he had like a top five MVP season not that long ago. And the Pistons, like that was them this year. They just finally got to that threshold of like we are competent. I think just having good vets and Tobias Harris, Malik Beasley, THJ, like Paul Reed, like they've just brought professionalism and competency to the locker room. And then you combine that just with the young guys naturally getting better. Cade, like he missed his second season essentially. So this is essentially his third full season, but
Hmm.
he gives you 26 and 9, and he's starting to look like the number one pick you drafted him to be. And you just grow up. So that's what's similar to me is that sometimes franchises just got to feel lost and listless, but you just hit a couple good decisions, and and once things click, things can transform pretty quickly. And like that's really what happened for the Pistons this year. I mean, they have the same core, but it feels like a completely different team. Just because they figured out how to turn those losses into wins.
And you talk about like making like one good move and leading and starting that domino effect, right? And
Yeah,
becoming a competent team. One person I got to look at, man, is JB Bickerstaff. He gets there and then just like turns around an entire team in just no time. And so, how much credit are you giving JB Bickerstaff for this turnaround?
he gets a lot of credit. So the reason why this has been sustainable is because of their defense. I think they're ninth or tenth in defensive rating for the regular season, but since New Year's they've been top five, and that kind of coincides with Asar Thompson taking on a bigger role once Jaden Ivey went down. But this was a top five defense for essentially the last two-thirds of the season, and like that's JB. He came in and he embraced physicality. I think, figured out pretty quickly how to put guys in positions to succeed defensively. Isaiah Stewart was kind of an awkward fit playing next to Jalen Duren at the four. And, JB pretty early on was like, no, you're just a five. Like, we want you to lock in on that. And it's like, okay, well, he's been shooting threes and this and that. Like, how's that going to work? He's a little, but Isaiah Stewart's always been a really good defensive center. It's just he's been asked to kind of play dual roles since he got in. So what does it look like to now in year five, you're just going back to center after you've been playing the four a lot over the last 2 years? And he went back to the five, and it turns out like he was already a pretty bubble four defensively, and that translates to the five. Obviously, you have a lot of centers who are stretching the floor, and like he could do that. Like you switch him onto a guard, he can stick with guards. He's a really good rim protector. He took a step forward as a shot blocker this season. Like there's then people will see during the series, but there are so many blocks where it's like he's 6'8", he doesn't have like this amazing vertical, but between his wingspan and timing, he's just able to get to some shots you wouldn't expect. And I think JB really kind of tapped into what could make this team unique, and that's defense, physicality. And this is like the last regime I think built this team around that idea.
Mm.
With Isaiah Stewart being a core player, with them embracing the physical, kind of old school Piston style of play. And I think JB is the coach who's really been able to unlock that and establish that out of the team nightly, and they've just fully bought in. So I had a vote this year. I did vote JB for Coach of the Year, and I think you look at Mark Daigneault, you look at Kenny Atkinson, Ime Udoka, like there's a lot of deserving coaches. But when you triple a team's win total, when you go from being below average defensively for 5, 6 years in a row to like top 10 and top five over the last third without any significant roster changes, like I think that just speaks to a culture change and just a want to that I think they just lacked in past seasons. And you ask any player, they'll say like JB. set this tone pretty early on. So, I think he's done exactly what he needed to do for this franchise. He gave them a new standard for success. He established a baseline as far as how you conduct yourself every day. And I think you see the results on the floor. They're physical, they play hard, they never give up. It's a team that is unrecognizable from last year because they always fight. There's never a moment where it's like, oh, it's been 6 minutes and they're just lost. Like they
This is
rarely
true.
get lost. They're always figuring stuff out.
Always, man. And so with that being said, JB, he should win coach of the year by your standard then for, essentially tripling that win total.
My belief is, yeah. I think it's more difficult to go from really bad to good than it is to go from good to great. I think when you have the tools, you can make that next step with the right tweaks. And I look at the Cavs, and I think Kenny Atkinson did a great job taking the same roster and unlocking more of his offensive potential. But some of that also is just Evan Mobley getting a lot better. I mean, he's absorbing hits. He wasn't absorbing a year ago. Like he's shooting the three. I feel the same way about them as I feel about OKC, where you just got to look at the roster and player development, and it's like any competent coach would, probably put together a coach of the year campaign with these types of players. But I don't think any coach could have came to Detroit and like brought them to 14 wins to 44 wins. To me, that's a much more difficult job.
For sure. I mean, you got Malik Beasley shooting from like a crazy percentage, especially from the corner three. Timmy's looking good out there. You got Durant, you got Jalen Durant, and you also have Isaiah Stewart, as you mentioned, playing some really good basketball too. The entire team, and I mean, Asora Thompson has just been phenomenal too. And when you look at that roster, it's like what I said. It's like having Julius Randle when Tom Thibodeau won Coach of the Year. It's like there's one player, and then there's a bunch of mostly role players and a few young guys who are still trying to develop and become the player they're supposed to be in the league. And so, you make a strong case for JB becoming coach of the year for this season. Salute to Knicks Station. Thank you all for tuning for another game of the week preview. Make sure to hit that thumbs up button for your boys. Make sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. With me on the other side is my guy Omari Sankofa the second. He covers the Detroit Pistons for the Detroit Free Press, and you can go catch him over at the Pistons Pulse podcast. All right, let's get back into this. So there's been a lot of talk, Omari. There's been a lot of talk about who's the best player in this series. And I didn't ask Andrew Claudio. Shout out to my guy. All right. I did not ask him who's the best player in the series because it would have been obviously two Knicks fans. We already know where that's going. Who is the best? Who is the best player in this series, man?
It's Cade. I got to go with Cade. You know,
Wow. Okay.
so here's my argument, and I think this is, I know Knicks fans are going to hear that and they're going to be like, well, he's the Pistons beat guy, so of course he's saying that. But I think I have very
I
sound
need to hear this. Let's hear it,
statistical
man.
evidence. So when you look at usage, Cade is tied for fifth for percentage of points scored for the team over the course of the season. He was topped by like a handful of guys like Shea, Giannis, like the expected guys, but he was tied for fifth for percentage of total points scored. He was second in the NBA in assist percentage. For what total amount of assists over the course of the season they were responsible with. He was only topped by Trae Young. Nobody else, he was top five in both. Nobody else was even like top eight. Like Jokic was like the only other player in the top nine. He was eighth in one category and ninth in the other. So Cade has had the heaviest load to me in the entire NBA. Like no one
Hmm.
else was even close to producing the amount of one team's output as he was when you look at it just both from a scoring and a playmaking standpoint. Their second best scorer has been Malik Beasley, and he's had a phenomenal season. He shot 41%, knocked down 300 3-pointers. But he's a 3-point specialist. They don't have a second option in the same way that you have Brunson and Cat, or the way you have Tatum and Jaylen Brown and Porzingis, or you look at the Cavs, or like you look around the league, most teams have multiple guys you can go to, and that's why they're not. That's why their usage rates are lower because they can share the load. Cade did not have anyone to share the load with. He still thrived in spite of that, and I just think workload wise to be able to take this team, from 14 to 44 wins, essentially having to do a lot, a lot of carry jobs every night. To me, I think that just stands out from a individual, how good are you standpoint. Like I think he showed that he could carry a team and they can reach some level of competency with him as their number one.
I give respect to Cade. He is very talented. I think the thing that if you're going to ask me talent wise, what does he have over Jalen Brunson? It's playing defense and being like a versatile defender. Um, but I hear you, but I'm gonna go with JB as the best player in this league. It's not even
Okay.
just because I'm a Knicks fan. I mean, you look at it right now, like you have ESPN articles talk about who's the top five MVP voting. They got Brunson up there. He was top five last year, and rightfully so. Like what he did last season, you could see that he can carry what Cade did this year, carry a bunch of role players into the postseason, take down, Joel Embiid, Tyrese Maxey, and Tobias Harris, who you guys now got. You got him back in the house. All right, you got Toby back, and so I look at Jalen Brunson from like an elevation standpoint. And I think while I understand the discourse of what you're saying for why Cade could be the best player in this matchup, I got to go with Brunson because I've seen him do it on multiple teams at the highest level, and he constantly elevates his game. I mean, this is a guy who has dropped 40 points against the Philadelphia 76ers during the regular season this year, even with Karl Anthony Towns, Mikal Bridges, he's still averaging 26 points in over 65 games, shooting about close to 50% from the field, close to 40% from downtown. And this guy has an effective field goal percentage of 55%. And so when I look at how efficient he is based on his size and just how you have even a talent like Karl Anthony Towns, but yet he can still go out there and get his against any type of defender. I mean, even go look at what he was doing against the Lakers before he injured himself. I'm like, this guy just knows how to attack and play at his pace. And it's not like he's the fastest guy out there. He's just strong, knows how to use just basic, not even basic, just like good technique, I should say. It's not basic. His footwork is just impeccable. I don't know, man. I gotta go with Jalen Brunson, and that's just my guy. After I've seen it for doing it for not only 1 year, 2 years, I saw him do it on the Mavericks. I haven't seen K do it yet in the postseason, man. He's gonna be on the stage this year, and so prove it to me first before we start anointing a guy as like this is the best player in this playoff series. I'm going with JB right now, man. And look, that's gonna be the matchup that's gonna be the key matchup for this game, man. I mean, it's gonna be Brunson versus Cade, and who can lead their guys down the stretch. And I'm looking forward to that of anything in this
No, for
series.
sure. And that's fair. Like Cade has not been there. Like this is his debut. This is his introduction essentially to the national audience. The Pistons really just started getting national TV games like 5 weeks ago, for being honest. So so this is all, very recent. So we can revisit in 2 months and maybe the narrative will change. But I would say I'm always impressed by Brunson's efficiency. Like at his size, like at his and he's like extremely herky jerky, decel, whatever. Like it's not like he's a bad athlete, but he does not score in like the traditional way, like at all. It's very YMCA, and I'm a big fan of
Very
YMCA hoopers.
YMCA.
Like I'm a big fan of YMCA hooping, and Brunson has like the best YMCA game of all time, and he's always so efficient. He's always within 2 percentage points of like 50, 40, 90, which is just, I mean, like that's hard to do, and he does it every single season. So. I'll give it to you. Like if you're going off experience, then okay, like he's earned that. I think Cade will put himself into the conversation this series, but we'll see.
Hey, I'm looking for, like I said, man, I'm looking forward to it. I just go back, like I even think back to that Miami series where you have Brunson going against, it's literally like him, RJ for like 4 or 5 games. Julius is injured, coming off an ankle injury, was damn near like almost a no-show in the first round against the Cavs. Had like 1, 2 decent games against the Miami Heat, and it was like Brunson. Literally, if you ask Knicks fans, Game 6 against the Miami Heat 2 years ago, you're like, oh my God, if Brunson doesn't sit for 2 minutes, does he push this thing to a Game 7? Like that's how good he is, man.
Yeah.
And he looks back, and we look back at that game like he had one fatal pass, and who was and trying to pass to some, I think it was Josh Hart at the top, and it's like that was the game right there. But dude is just, he's just box office, man. This whole thing is gonna be box office, man. I'm looking forward to how these teams play beyond Cade and Brunson. And, when we get down into this matchup, like, what are your expectations? Like, how do you expect both teams to approach this series? And I'm gonna like, so why don't you start with the Pistons?
I expect the Pistons to fully lean into their identity. There's been a lot of focus on how Cade played like through the regular season series, and like he was obviously fantastic in all 4 of those games, but they more so won because of defense. That even if they weren't able to individually slow down Brunson or individually slow down Cat or whoever, like team wide, they found ways to stop the Knicks consistently, especially in the second half. And I think what the Pistons did a great job of throughout the course of the series, especially in the 3 games they won. I think they got blown out in the first game, but I feel like they really dictated both the pace and the physicality. And they're a team that can kind of exist in the mud a bit. They have enough athleticism to, between Duran's putbacks and, like Asar's backdoor cuts and like you've got Cade engineering stuff, like, one of B's or THJ's probably having a hot night. Tobias is going to get you within the range of, like between 13 and 21 points every night is
Hey
what,
man, he's got to redeem himself, man. Before I keep going,
you
before
know,
I go that way, because I saw
hey,
that man put up a zero in Philly.
he's been solid for him. But this is a team that can kind of dictate how the game goes, and to me, that's going to be the key. Like New York could get hot. You have Brunson and Cat, and sometimes in the playoffs, it's just we have way more firepower than you, and you can't shut that down. I think that's just the reality of the situation. Like they're gonna have to win this based off of defense, and I think you have to dictate the tone early, physicality wise, and defensively as a whole. Rebounding boards, like any edge you can get as far as that. Like if you're the Pistons, I think you can't leave any of that on the table. You can control that, and I think you'll be in every single game.
For sure. And when I look at it from a Knicks standpoint, I just see them going straight to their offense as being like
Yeah,
their weapon, and which would be interesting because at the beginning of the season they were really utilizing that Brunson Cat pick and roll, but then teams figured out, hey, if they're gonna do that, we're gonna counter by putting a decent wing who, can guard Brunson. So we're gonna try to deflect them away from that. Now, I'm curious to see if the Pistons go that route. I mean, you got Beasley, he's an okay to like middle of the pack sometimes, depending on a below average defender. Um, I think Thompson is probably going to get that assignment then if like you do that. But then if you leave him there, do you really want Cat to like try to abuse him in the paint? He doesn't really have that weight to go against a 7-footer who has the finesse and scoring ability like Cat. So I feel like it's going to be interesting to see how Detroit defensively, since that's what you're talking about, like making your mark on. Just because I feel like the position that would stop this team or really frustrate this team is the wing, and it's not that you guys don't have like wings that can contribute offensively. I just looking at defensively, like who is stepping up. Like I look at the depth chart. Once again, I'm talking about Tim Hardaway. I don't really see it there. Maybe you go Tobias Harris, but he plays more so the power forward position. I know you got Ron Holland, the second, who's also out there as well. So, like, where do you see if that's going to be like if that's been the strategy for good teams to go against? Is there anybody you would put against Carl Anthony Towns from a wing perspective to try to limit the Brunson Cat pick and roll?
yeah. I assume Asar is going to be on Brunson most of the time. He's their top lead defender. I don't think you put Cade on Brunson. You don't want him picking up fouls. So I think that's how they'll go about that. I think you put Tobias on Cat. Like, Tobias is 6'8", strong, really strong defensive rebounder. So you're not too worried about giving up any size there. And I think you can live with Tobias getting in front of Cat and at least denying him
Hmm.
open threes. I think you could put Jalen Duren on Cat as well. And I don't think Cat exploited the pick and pop as much as other teams have, but the Pistons have really kind of struggled against stretch fives this season. Like Brook Lopez, Miles Turner have like destroyed the Pistons just off of getting open three after open three. And that's always a risk with Cat is that, you force some lineup changes early just because he knocks down 3 or 4 threes in the first quarter or something. And it's like, this is not tenable for us to win this game. So I think Isaiah Stewart, like, especially in that last game, I thought he did a good job on Cat. And this may be a series where you just kind of have to lean on Isaiah, as much as you can to match up with the Cat minutes, just because, Isaiah can shuffle his feet. If he switched on to Brunson, like, you don't hate that. He can bother Cat. Um, I think Stu's probably your remedy there. So a lot of
Hmm.
it would just come down to rotations and how much they could get away with in the starting lineup with Duran and Tobias. But by game three, like I could easily see them just saying, like, Stu's our best bet. Like he's playing 35 minutes and we'll just figure it out.
Interesting. Okay. And well, you talk about Cat not being utilized in the pick and pop. I mean, this is the lowest he's shot from three in quite some time. I mean, going back to 2019, 2020, he was averaging about 8 attempts from downtown. And the lowest prior to that was him averaging 4.9. So essentially 5 3-pointers. And now he's at 4.7. And there's some nights where he's, willing to let threes rip. And there's other nights that that's just not the case. And I think that's just kind of by design. And which leads me to my next point where the Knicks love to work in the paint, man. Like they love scoring in the paint, mid range, finishing around the rim. I mean, Catches has been working the post a lot this season. JB and I mean Brunson himself, like he likes to get downhill and just work that same like 15 to 10, 15 in. And then you have Bridges who's just, I say he's like another Rip Hamilton, just the way he's able to get like around screens and just get to his spots in the mid range. And he's another guy that just like likes to work around there. And then you add Josh Hart, another guy who likes to get downhill. OG who cuts back door, like between Hart, OG, and Bridges, they all cut very well. So they're always finishing in the paint. So for me, I just look at this game. I don't know if we're going to see a lot of picking and popping, but I think we'll see a lot of physical play being played in the paint. And my concern with that is that not only are the Knicks good at that, and not only that's where the Pistons like to play, but the Pistons are actually pretty good when it comes to defending the rim. When I look at Quinn of the Glass, they're ranked seventh right now. They're one of the better teams when it comes to preventing teams scoring from around the rim. And then when you look at points in the paint by NBA stats, like they're in the top five when it comes to limiting points in the paint. And so this is where, for me, if you're asking like this is where the rubber meets the road, who's going to win that battleground right there?
And that's to me, that's the key. And I think that's why the Pistons have had success in the regular season is because the Knicks kind of play to their strengths. Like the Pistons want you to come inside and, try to out muscle them or out athlete them because they have a pretty big starting five, like Kate 6'6", Asar 6'7", Tobias is 6'8", you have Duren. Like TSJ is 6'6", right? Like TSJ is not like, an amazing defender, but you still have size. Like, it's not like there's going to be too many teams that could come out and just like outsides you in that regard. Duran's like an elite rebounder. Tobias one of the best rebounders in this position. Asar is one of the best rebounders at his position. Like the Pistons like playing inside. Like you can play physical inside. Like that's their style to play. They've been weak against the three. Like if they spam pick and pop with that, Cat Brunson pick and roll, I think that would change the entire dynamic of the series because like the Pistons are just like they just give up more threes, and
Mm.
typically when they've had games where they struggled in, or even against a team that's like quote unquote a bad team but got hot, it's because like they managed to knock down 21 threes. And there was a stretch in the middle of the season, like the Pelicans knocked down like 22 threes against the Pistons, like like a couple weeks ago. The Pistons still won, but like teams can get hot from three and especially opposing bigs like Lopez and Miles Turner both had games this season where they were just getting open three after open three. And that's been the Pistons' Achilles heel. Like Cat, like he has, I mean, he's like the perfect big for that. He hasn't really had that going because, like you said, he's played more inside. But to me, like if I like the Knicks, the 3-point shot is their key for them. And I think especially with Cat, like you want to stretch them out as much as possible. Because that limits the physicality. Now you got to be light on your feet and it just changes the dynamic of the game. So this Knicks team is interesting because I feel like Tibbs is kind of known for like that Bud style. But
This is not this
but
team.
the roster is built for like a more, fast-paced, finesse style. Like you've got guys who can do it, but I'm curious to see if they just have to shift identities in this series because the Pistons are going to beat you if you're trying to win in the paint. If you're winning from outside, now it's a different game.
Yeah, and that's like, I mean, it's funny that you say the Pistons are bad at covering the three. So are the Knicks. And so,
Yeah.
that's where we've lost to you guys as well. It's like, oh, look, why are we leaving Malik Beasley open? And I forget the Twitter account. Sorry, I can't remember your name right now, my guy. But it's like, I saw a Twitter account. Why are we leaving Malik Beasley open for three? He
Yeah.
tweeted that out yesterday. He's like, sorry, I'm just practicing for, just practicing for this weekend.
Yeah.
I'm like, I had to chuckle a little bit because I'm like, I could see that totally happening where the Knicks are just leaving guys wide open because Tibbs loves to protect the paint. He loves to utilize drop coverage. It's still that type of system. And look, you mentioned Tibbs coaching the style that the Pistons like to play. That's why I'm interested to see how
Yeah.
what adjustments he makes. We still have had the top rated offense. I'm curious to see what offensive adjustments he makes in this matchup and see if we get to see a little bit more pick and pop from Cat. And just because between him and Brunson, like both those guys, as you know, can knock down three. So pick your poison at that point. And then if you have either one, they could both finish in the paint. That's what makes them such one of the most lethal, pick and roll duos in the NBA. But another thing that's I'm looking at too when I'm looking at this game is rebounding. I think rebounding is going to be very critical in this matchup, especially with a physical team like the Detroit Pistons. It's just difficult, man, when you have to play a physical brand of basketball, and that's where I'm wondering if the Knicks are ready for that. Like I know Josh Hart's a good rebounder. I know Karl Anthony Towns is a good rebounder. Mitchell Robinson is a good rebounder. I'm not. And before Knicks fans just get in the comment section, what? No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying it's look, when you play a physical team that loves to rebound, as we were the last couple of seasons, it gets taxing. And I am wondering if the Knicks are ready to do that for this regular season because they rank 24th. This is very unlike Tom Thibodeau to have a team outside of the top 10 in rebounding, while the Detroit Pistons are 13th. And so, in a game where if you're not hitting your shots, you got to fight for every possession, second chance opportunities, that kind of plays to the Pistons' hand. And so I'm wondering if the Knicks are ready for that battle too.
Yeah, and that's the thing, because I can see this being a series that's just classic East Coast. Like you may have a game that's like, like low scoring by today's standards, like 93, 92, and like literally the last 2 minutes are just who can grab more rebounds, right? Because neither team is necessarily cooking from three or from anywhere because it's just been this physical battle. So like I agree, like especially in the playoffs, I think it's just a game-long battle of attrition, and it's just you need to be able to withstand for the entire game and grab those key rebounds late. And I think like I mentioned earlier, like Duran is a really strong rebounder. Since he stepped into the league, he's been a really strong rebounder. Asar, really strong rebounder. Cade, for a size, really strong rebounder. Tobias, strong rebounder. So they've only been a little bit above average over the course of the season, but rarely when they lose a game, it's because they got beat on the boards. And the only time that they have is when they've been weak up front because Duran missed a game or, like they, you know, Isaiah Stewart and they got guys playing out of position. So that's been the Pistons game. I feel like the Knicks, like I'm surprised you said that they're 24th because yeah, Cat's averaging like 12 or 13. Like I know Josh Hart is, but it seems like for them it's more so a handful of guys carrying most of the rebounding efforts.
It is. And when we had RJ, Julius, Mitch, Isaiah Harns, like those guys can grab boards. I mean, you had Mitch who's he missed most of the season, so he's going to be in this playoff series. So, I know I said it's 24 right now in the regular season. Mitch playing should help a lot with that, especially if we get to see the two big man lineup with him out there. That just strengthens the rebounding battle. And so, I feel more confident. I want Tom Thibodeau to put Mitch out there and utilize the two big man lineup. I think that especially in this matchup against the Pistons, where you have a lot of wingspan, a lot of height. I think this is the matchup that calls for that. So if he does that, then I'm like, okay, then I feel comfortable. Then it's like it's going to be in my opinion, a little bit closer where you don't have to worry about the rebounding battle as much, unless you go in with that traditional starting five, which for the most part is what has resulted in the Knicks being 24th in the league. And for me, looking at this rebounding battle, this is going to be my determining factor for the series. Would you say that? Like, is this the stat that you're looking at where I'm like, on a night to night basis, whoever wins the rebounding battle, that's the one that's going to determine who wins?
I think so. Like to me, this just has all the makings of just a grinded out, physical, just classic East Coast battle. And in a game like that, I mean, every single possession matters. Like these are not neither of these teams are like the most fast paced teams. These are not teams that like get up a lot of threes or anything. They both kind of I think trend toward the same style of play. So yeah, especially in a series like this, like I could easily just see you look at the rebounds and whoever probably dominated that area more is probably the team that won.
I agree with you right there. And Omar, right before I get you out of here, I got a shout out to our sponsor, Underdog Fantasy. Use that promo code KFT to get up to $1,000 in instant bonus cash. And people, let me tell you something about Underdog Fantasy. I love the app. I go on there, I create a ticket, and I think I know a little bit more than what Underdog is putting out there. So, I'm trying to earn a little bit of money. Put some $5 down, maybe a little bit more, and you try to get a good return. And the cool thing about Underdog Fantasy is that you don't have to just stick to the NBA if you're creating a ticket. You can mix and match between all sports. So you got hockey going on right now, you got the NBA, you got MLB. So you can mix and match anywhere between 2 to 8 players when creating a ticket. And all you got to do is just choose higher or lower for any stat that you believe the player would do better in or worse in. So let's say we got in this matchup Jalen Brunson at 25 and a half points. Let's say I choose higher. I'm believing that Jalen Brunson will go higher, right? And so that's essentially how you got to do it when you create your ticket. And it's just simple as that. Now the cool thing is they give you options now. If you believe that all the selections that you made, you believe that all of them will hit, you can go all in and go get the big return. But if you're not as confident, you can go the insured route. Okay. So let's say you choose four, you get to say, hey, if I get three right, I still get some money. Four, I get a little bit of a bigger return. Not the same amount as if you go all in, but they do give you options. And the other option that they do offer, if you don't want to create a ticket, you can put on your GM cap and then do a fantasy draft with your friends and see who's the better general manager, who should be given that big salary to go create the new team. So you can do that all through Underdog Fantasy. Use that promo code KFTV to get up to $1,000 in instant bonus cash and a free pick. All right, man. Omari, let's wrap this thing up and get out of here. X factors, man. X factors. I feel like this is, it's always a conversation in playoff series. Like, who's going to be that guy that comes out of nowhere? Who do you need consistency from to really turn it, to really put the series in your favor? Since you're our guest, man, who do you think that is for the Detroit Pistons?
I'm gonna go for Sar Thompson. I think
Mm,
defensively, and we've kind of seen it with his brother with Houston, kind of getting his accolades for being one of the top defenders. But Sar is right there. I mean, he's one of the top defenders in the league. They comfortably put him on the best player every single night with no qualms. He's versatile at 6'7". I mean, athletic as all get out. I mean, like he goes viral probably once a week just doing something that's just like not like a normal thing for a basketball player to do, and he just kind of casually does it. And I think this could be a breakout series from him just because of that. Like he's just like the ultimate like Swiss Army knife.
mm.
And what I'm curious with Asar is again, like his brother, he's not the strongest shooter, but you're almost elite at everything else. Like you could keep the ball moving in fast break scenarios. Like he's a good backdoor cutter and just interior scorer finisher as a whole. You could put him in the dunker spot, depending on the matchup and feel pretty good about it. And you look at his last 10, 15 games of the season, he was averaging like 3 blocks and steals combined and like not a lot of minutes. Like, he's not playing like 35 minutes. He's just a natural disruptor. And, for him, it's can they can they leave him on the floor in big moments knowing that he's not going to be able to shoot? And how do you mitigate that if it does become a problem? Throughout the regular season, that's not been a problem because he does so much other stuff. In the playoffs, especially when possessions grind out and you can't have too many possessions stall out without a bucket. I'm curious to see if he can continue to find ways to engineer buckets and kind of mitigate that for the Pistons. But I mean, Asar is super fun to watch. Like, I think he's got all the potential in the world. And, this series is going to be a really great test for him because outside of the shooting, like he's absolutely a guy that is indispensable for him just because of his defense and his secondary playmaking.
I like that choice. Him and his brother just, you mentioned, they're like walking highlight reels every time. You
Yeah.
just go, it's like here's NBA top 10. And it's like, whoa, look at that. There's a Thompson brother right there. So I like
Yeah.
that pick for you. For me, this is tough. Very tough. There's like two people that I could pick from, and I'm gonna go with Mikal Bridges. The other one would have been Josh Hart, but I feel like he's going to be ready for the postseason. He's another guy. He's like Brunson. He's a playoff riser. So I don't really want to go with Hart just because he does everything for this team that they miss, whether it's rebounding, playmaking, just being that ultimate hustle guy. I could go with Josh Hart, but I feel like he's earned enough and he's done it more often enough this season where it's like it's not an unknown at this point. Mikal Bridges, on the other hand, this is a guy who's had a underwhelming season. After the trade for him, we expected him to be a legitimate third option for this team, a guy that would initiate the offense, be that creator, and we saw some of that when Brunson was out. But even with Brunson in, he just kind of goes to the wayside. Partially that's due to him not being aggressive enough and making plays for himself. Other part is Tom Thibodeau not necessarily drawing up the plays for him to get him open. And so this is why he's my X factor because if he's going offensively, then I feel like this team just reaches new heights because he is a guy that can create for himself. He is a guy that can work that mid range very well, knock down threes, a guy that can, not be the greatest finisher around the rim through contact, but he will work off ball and look for those those backdoor cuts and just get you easy points. And so for me, it's going to be Mikal Bridges offensively and then defensively. I always say it's going to be OG Anunoby who's going to get the Cade Cunningham assignment. I think it should be just because the physicality that Cade plays with. I think having OG on Cade would be a good was a good equalizer just to like tame Cade from getting to his spots, especially getting downhill. But they may give Mikal Bridges the start from the jump because he has been doing that this season where he gets the point of attack initiator. And so he may get that chance to see, hey, can I guard Cade and can I stop him from doing his thing? And he's been up and down doing that too. And so if he's gonna get that job and it would make things 10 times easier defensively for OG so he could be help and just roam everywhere else and play another stronger position, maybe get Tobias because we saw what Tobias did to Bridges in the post in the last matchup. I'm like, do you really want that? Is that what you wanted? Is that what you want to rely on? So for me, it's Bridges. He's going to be my X factor in this series, offensively, defensively. Um, that's my guy, and it's just because of what you traded for him and what he's giving you this season. It's kind of left like, there's feel like there could be a little bit more, and it feels like it's both him and the coach, as I said. So I'm going with Mikal Bridges. You were going with Asar Thompson. I feel like that's look, man. We're going with the wings, man. We're going with the
Going with
wings.
the wings.
The wings are going to be critical, man. We've seen that throughout the entire NBA. You got to have wings in this league. So I'm going there. We're going there, and then obviously got to wrap it up with who wins this series, Omari. Who wins this series? You already told me that Cade is the best player in the series, so I feel like I'm not going to be shocked at what you're about to tell me right now.
So I do have the Knicks in seven.
Oh,
And the reason
okay.
for that is because, I think just the combination of home court advantage, uh, and just overall having two guys you can go to. Like I would expect the Knicks defensive strategy. Well, I'm curious to see what they do because I feel like they defended him Cade more so with Bridges and Hart during the regular season and not OG as much.
Hmm.
And in the playoffs, you probably want to put OG on them. But you're gonna do everything you can. Like your first, second, and third priorities are probably just slowing down Cade, and you're gonna dare everybody else to curate. And that's kind of been the book on the Pistons for the past few seasons, even though they've been good this season. It's just do everything you can at Cade, make the rest of the guys figure out how to play without him, essentially, if you could take him out the game. And the Knicks could mitigate that, obviously, having Brunson and Cat, like two guys who are always going to, command the full attention of the defense, can create late. And if there's an Achilles heel for the Pistons, that's probably it. Just not having a secondary guy who can kind of buy you those buckets late. Like everybody's going to be looking at Cade in those moments. And realistically, that's not going to change for this team too much. So I think over the course of a 7-game series, that favors the Knicks just off of that. But I also do think that if the Knicks win, it's going to take them 7 games because the Pistons are not going to go away. They're really going to have to scrap and claw. And, I think it's going to come down to the wire. But I do have the Knicks in 7.
If this series goes seven, I will give big ups to the Pistons just because first time since 2019 they've been in the playoffs. First
Yeah,
time since what 2008 since you guys have won a playoff
right.
series, and so major kudos if it goes seven, just because that's tough. And for me, I'll be looking at this Knicks team with a little side eye because I'm like, bro, you are. I look at this talent, and I know a lot of people are going out there saying sweep five. I'm going to go Knicks in six because I do give the
Yeah.
respect to the Pistons. I think the physicality will get to the Knicks. I'm not sure if they're going to be focused every single night. I've seen boneheaded plays from this team throughout all 82 games, and it's just like, come on, man. And so I'm going six because of that for what the Knicks are. I also say that I also go with Knicks in six because, and I believe they will win the series because of playoff experience alone. And when I look at this team and I just go like look at that starting five to the Pistons starting five, the guys who have had playoff experience is Tobias Harris, Tim Hardaway, and that's really it. I mean, you got Malik Beasley who's coming off the bench, and I'm like, all right, JB Bickerstaff, another guy who has playoff experience with the Cavs, but I'm looking at this Knicks team then, and you look at Karl Anthony Towns. He just made it to the Western Conference Finals last year with the Timberwolves. Has been in the postseason at quite a few times in his career. You look at JB, the last 3 seasons, what he's done, just being a Mavs, being a Knick, and just how he's able to take them to at least the second round. And he's been in the Western Conference Finals himself. Josh Hart, a guy who has been in the playoff postseason 2 years in a row. Mikal Bridges has been in the NBA Finals as well, and so he's been through NBA playoffs with Phoenix. And so these are guys who all have experience, and when I look at that, I'm like, yo, how can you? It's tough for me to say, it's not even tough for me to say. I just look at it saying these guys have so much experience that they're ready for they're ready for the bright lights. They understand the assignment. They've been there before. They know what it takes. They know how to prep. They know the mindset that you got to go in there with. And so that's why I give them the edge in this one. Even with OG, who I'd even mentioned, like this is a guy who, even though he didn't play in the postseason where he won a championship, he has been in postseasons, and so he understands what it takes as well. And even last year, he was another guy who elevated his game in the postseason. Where I'm like, oh wow, we don't have another offensive creator, but somehow OG is doing mini Kawhi things in a matter where I'm like very shocked. And so I'm going with the Knicks in six. Like I said, I think if the Knicks, it's going to go six because I think the Knicks will lose focus in some games. I think the Pistons' physicality will just make it. go to that distance. If it goes 7, I'm going to be giving this team a little bit of a side eye for the amount you put in, just because it's supposed to be overwhelming talent. If you're going against a team that hasn't been there before and there's no shot at the Pistons, very talented team, but if you only got one guy, as you were talking about, that can create when you have 5 guys that can put the ball in the hoop and you got one of the best offenses, I'll be a little disappointed. But I'm going Knicks in 6. You're going Knicks in 7. Amari, I appreciate you for coming through. Please let the listeners know where they can find you if you got any work up and coming that we should be on the lookout for.
Oh, for sure. Thanks for having me, Alex. And you can find me on Twitter, first and last name, Omari Sankofa. I'm over at the Pistons Post with my co-host, Motor City Hoops, Bryce Simon. We publish our podcast once a week. And beyond that, you can find my written work on freak.com.
Awesome. Amari, appreciate you coming through as always. Knicks Nation. And I know we got some Detroit Pistons Nation. You guys have been in the chat throughout this channel this entire week, so I know you're all tapped in and ready as well. Make sure to hit that thumbs up button for your boys. Make sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. Make sure to support our sponsor, Underdog Fantasy. Use that promo code KFTV to get up to $1,000 in instant bonus cash and a free pick. And make sure to sign up for the newsletter so that way you are aware of where to be and what to do for this weekend, all right? And also just to keep up with the great written content that we got, okay? And so let me also tell you people this, the good people out there, all right? Because, one, make sure to go to KnicksFanTV.com and spend, and if you want to win a free chance to go with CP to game 1, all right? Go to KnicksFanTV.com. If you spend up to $50, you get 1 entry. If you spend up to $100, you get 2 entries. So if you do that, you could potentially win a chance to go to game 1 with CP, all right? So make sure to do that. Second thing I got to tell you, we got a watch party. It's going down this Saturday at 4 p.m. sharp at Ainsworth in Midtown, all right? So make sure to go get your ticket and to go get your reservation, okay? Happy hours from 4 to 5 p.m. Special guest John Starks will be showing up, so make sure to go over there, go hang out with him, so that way you can get some pictures as well. And you can always make sure to enjoy yourself because we got Eric L. Beats DJing for us as always. So when it's halftime, when there's commercial breaks, you'll be getting music and then you'll be getting the live game action while everything's going on. Omar, appreciate you for coming through once again, my man, and appreciate Knicks and Pistons Nation for tuning in